Welcome to the Miracle You, guiding you on the journey towards finding passion and purpose and how to discover, create, and live a life by your design. Whether your success has been plentiful or your missed opportunities have been overwhelming, we can help you become a more empowered, masterful person and show you how to share your gift with the world. It's time to inspire change from within with the host of the Miracle You, Vince Kramer.
Hello, imagination. I'm Vince Kramer, your host, and welcome to the Miracle You, where you learn about the magic of living your life by finding the example in real life. I found in the work that we do at Imagine Miracles, the work that I did in the corporate world, even the work that I did in the military, that the thing that gets in our way the most is ourselves. We have a tendency to rely on old beliefs, or we have a tendency to believe that we're the only one that can get something done. And we lock ourselves into that small room and we don't get to see the whole house. We don't get to experience the magic of having other rooms to venture into and to take us into a new level, into a new place in our lives. Each one of us has so many gifts and talents that we can use or not use. We have so many abilities that we can use or not use. And sometimes we get locked into, especially as small business owners or even the head of or a part of a family, we get locked into that we're responsible for the success of the family. We're responsible for the success of the small business. And we get mired in the details of the day, the details of the work, and we stop seeing the big picture. When we allow ourselves to see the big picture and be the orchestrator of that big picture, is when we really start finding ourselves more fully. We start opening ourselves up to our possibilities that are truly unlimited in the universe. And we give ourselves an opportunity to build something much bigger than ourselves that can continue to make a huge difference in the world. I'm with Jason Skeesick today. Jason is a U.S. Army veteran, coach, and an entrepreneurial evangelist. He's a father, husband, fighter, and carrier of heavy things. His company, Spear and Clover, helps businesses with good leaders, talented teams, and strong playbooks go from perennial contenders to championship dynasties. You can find Jason hosting the weekly Spear and Clover podcast, available on YouTube and across all audio platforms. Jason Skeesick, are you ready to share the miracle of you with the imagination?
Oh my goodness, Vince, I really am. And I am so honored that you've invited me on your show today. I am so excited to talk to you today.
I'm appreciative of you being here. There's so much that you've got to share that as I mentioned earlier, before we started recording this, that I haven't talked about much on the podcast yet. So I'm really excited to talk about that. First of all, thank you for your service. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, I think you're worth it, Vince.
Well, thank you. I spent a few years in the Air Force myself, so I know what it feels like to serve your country and then bring all those skills from that into the business world and into your private life. So like I said, I can't wait to share it. And second of all, it's exciting to have a podcaster on. It kind of changes things up a little bit when you have a guest that's got his own podcast, and it makes it easier to just kind of flow through the podcast. So I can't wait to see where we go. Before we do really dive into any questions, Jason, could you share a little bit more of who you are beyond that short bio and what you're doing right now?
Yeah, of course. And if you don't mind, I'd like to include a part that I normally don't include in these interviews because of the nature of your show. So normally my podcast interview story starts with the military service, but I'm going to take it back actually. When I was 8 years old, Two things happened. One, I was diagnosed with what I call entrepreneur's disease, which is ADD. And two, I was isolated from regular classes and put into a behavior disorder class at my school. And I was very quickly very, very depressed. I felt awful. And I don't have much of a memory of this, but my mom has told me about it. And so my mother fought to have me put into a special private school that was significantly better for me, but also very harsh. It was a K through 12 school with 40 students. And so some of these kids were 17, 18 years old. There was a smoke break in the middle of the day at this school, and there was no summer break at all. So we went from 4 p.m. or I'm sorry, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. every single day, Monday through Friday, year round. And the reason I tell you that, Vince, is because I think if there's anything that's been a miracle for me, it's that I'm here talking to you today. That, you know, if you took bets when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, I was there through seventh grade, till seventh grade. You know, the odds weren't very good for me. And through the support of some great staff at that facility, through my own interest in discovering a love of learning, and of course, through the support of my parents and those folks around me, I was blessed to make it out of there in a place where I could see the next step, which was to go to the military. So yes, I spent 4 years in the military, and I was a network engineer, Vince. And I know you're a tech guy, but I'll explain it for the folks at home. A network engineer in the Army is somebody that you give a shovel to, and you tell them to dig holes and lay in conduit and pull miles and miles of fiber optic cable in the hot sun, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so that's what I did. I did that for one particular deployment, and then the rest, of course, was more standard, you know, military stuff. When I got back, I did two things. One, I went back to school for a degree in finance. My plan was to take over the world of industry through the banking side of the house. And two, at the same time, I started a small CrossFit gym with two veteran friends of mine who are still brothers, like brothers to me to this day. And we started a CrossFit gym on the fourth floor of a dusty old warehouse in Chicago. Over the course of time, it became very clear to me that it was very difficult for me to pay attention and focus and work hard on other people's businesses, on other people's missions, and on things that I just wasn't super excited about. I'll never forget being in a boardroom multiple times, but one time in particular where it was me, my boss, my boss's boss, my boss's boss's boss, and two things I noticed. Number one was only guy in the room I could see eye to eye with was the entrepreneur. And the boss's 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 boss, the guy that I maybe one day could become if everything worked out, he had a worse life than me. He lived further away. He got up earlier. He made it to the office sooner. He did more work throughout the day, and he left after I did. I don't care how much money he was making. I didn't want his life. And so through a circuitous path, I decided to focus 100% on this small business that was stealing all of my passion and all of my attention. And the moment that I did, Vince, the moment that I treated it like a capital B business, very, very quickly, we not just improved, we 10x'd our performance in about 18 months. It took us to 10x our performance. From there, you know, the path goes on, and ultimately I've found a love for helping other entrepreneurs through similar transitions and transformations. But that's a great point for us to kind of take a breath.
So let me ask you this, Jason, as life was presenting itself, and there was obviously the universe was in your corner through your life as you found that school, you found those people to help you. Was there anything that happened in your life outside of that knowingness that you didn't want the boss's job? Was there anything in your life that really propelled you to or opened you up to, I want to live life differently and I want to give back to the world?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Well, you know, I think there's a few moments in my life, you know, my father for sure, but also in the military where I learned that when there's an opportunity to take responsibility, that I should step forward, not step back, and certainly not stay right where I'm at. And I think that every time I've ever helped somebody, even if it was begrudgingly, ultimately I have been very proud of the result and also enjoyed the feeling. The feeling of helping people feels good to me. It's never felt like a chore. I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but like when someone wants to get on a call with me and just ask me ideas and for help with problems, I almost always 100% of the time will say yes and do so. And I always enjoy it. And that's why I do this professionally. But I will tell you, it didn't start off that way. I remember distinctly, especially in the military, just knowing, and you've been in the Air Force, so you can know this too. You're standing in formation and somebody says, I need 3 volunteers. The last thing that you want to do, Vince, is step forward and take volunteers on that. But I just started to do it. Somebody that I respected who was further along than me, I think he was a sergeant. Honestly, I can't remember who, but I remember distinctly them going, hey, anytime somebody asks for a volunteer, raise your hand. And so I started to do that. And I hated it at first. And then I didn't hate it so much. And pretty soon, not only did I like the feeling of, being the person that people could turn to help them through problems, even if it was just as simple as moving a stack of sandbags or a big pallet of water or something. But also people in the organization started to view me differently. They started to talk to me differently. I didn't get the short end of the stick as often. And in a million little ways, my life improved. And I just have carried that forward and certainly into coaching and CrossFit, certainly into my corporate life, and certainly into my coaching career now.
One of the things that you've shared just in your examples in your story is that everything kind of leads you to a certain point in your life. Could you share how the gifts and experiences of the past has come into helping you bring Spear and Clover and making that difference in industry?
Yeah, definitely. So 2 points, and I feel like I've said twos. Everything's been twos today, but 2 points I would make about that is number one, I am so grateful that I didn't get the dopamine hit or the congratulatory pats on the back in the corporate world. I was okay. I was adequate at it. And I don't know about you, Vince, but I don't like being okay or adequate at anything. And so there was sort of a negative motivator there where it was like, oh, well, you're able to do this, but you're not unbelievable at it. You're not going to be, nobody was earmarking me for the C-suite or anything like that. I was subpar. I have tons of respect for those people in those roles. Those guys are and gals are unbelievably intelligent, some of the smartest people you've ever met, some of the most detailed people you ever met. But the second, so one thing was me not, I wanted to be good at what I do. I wanted to have that feeling of being able to be very good at it. And then separately, I just remember all of the times that I was doing those things entrepreneurially. I started by solving little problems. The military really taught me that is, a drill bit breaks and you're in Iraq. Well, you're not getting another drill bit today, and you might not get another drill bit for a couple of weeks. And so we still need to make this whole. And so we had to figure out ways to overcome these little adversities. And over the course of time, I became very good at troubleshooting and overcoming problems. Well, what is a business, Vince? Especially at the outset, it's solving problems like that. And so having the courage to do that was really a combination of me having experienced all of these little wins. And I talk about this all the time. Who is somebody that sits on a mountain of little wins? Well, Vince, they're a winner. And who is somebody who sits on a mountain of losses? Well, unfortunately, Vince, I think they're a loser. And so what I tried to do was accrue as many of these little wins that I could, where at every step of the way, I felt myself being able to take bigger swings and finding more success incrementally in that path.
It's very interesting that you share in that way. And what I've found is for so many people, they're always looking at the end goal. And if the end goal's not there, they're stressed, they're worried, they're working more hours probably than they should to get to that end goal. But as you share, it's those little wins that get us there on the way. And those little wins come from sharing who we are and why we truly came to this earth to live. And I really love the fact that you've looked at your world as you stepped into Spear and Clover as I want to help the people who are doing well blow it out of the water. And that means moving into a dynasty. What's your definition of dynasty?
It's a great question. I think a dynasty organization is somebody that can get favorable results year after year without specific reliance on any one role player, any one manager, or a specific tactics. And I think, unfortunately, and this is across the board in these industries, kind of most industries, is people think the next shiny object, the next hire, the next drafted wide receiver or quarterback, the next playbook from somebody who's won a championship for another team or another company is going to get me over the hump. But ultimately, that's the difference between a regular team that's maybe does okay and a dynasty organization that we write books about and do documentaries about. It's not one player, it's not one group of plays, and it's certainly not one coach. What it is it's the foundations of an organization. You think about the Patriots is a good example that people like to use for a dynasty from the 2000s, right? You hear about players like Ocho Cinco or Randy Moss that were trouble in other organizations, and they immediately, when they join that team, you never hear about them being problems again. And why is that? Is it because they changed? I don't think so. Is it because the coach somehow sat them on their knee and gave them a stern talking to? Probably not. I think what it was is this is an organization who has a clear foundation and a clear framework of bringing people in and putting out championship teams regardless of who's on that roster. And so I have this obsession with that idea, with helping people do what we see in sports but in business. I just don't think we don't have to see the same lauding in business.
It's interesting that you talk sports and you talk business, but it's sports, it's business, it's your organization, it's your family. It all
Family,
comes
yeah.
together that way. How do you help build that foundation?
Questions. So, Vince, I think a lot of people sell answers. And even when you were talking about it earlier, you were saying it's interesting how I have a view on the long term, and most people can't rise above the day to day. And I think the answer to that is people secretly know that they don't want to answer the questions that their business, that their family, that their lifestyle has that asks them. You're presented with questions. Should I eat healthy? Well, the answer to that is yes. And so if I choose not to eat healthy every single day, I have to ignore the question. Should I be in this dead end job? The answer is no. If I choose to continue to go to that dead end job, I've now become intellectually dishonest with myself. And so what I try to help people to do is not by telling them the steps that they should be taking or the mountain that they should climb. It's simply by asking them what their goals are long term, giving them some space to think about it, and then simply asking them if each decision they make in the micro, meso, and macro level are actually leading them up that hill or further away. And honestly, it's that simple. Winning is simple, Vince. It's just something that a lot of us day to day choose to ignore because we're afraid of what the answers are going to be, and we don't want to face that.
Like you said, if the question's not there in front of us, if we can push it off somehow or another, then we can act like it never showed up. How do you help people get to that place where they're ready to answer the questions, where they're ready to hold themselves to the candle, if you will, to answer the questions that are in front of them?
I think sometimes these things can be disjointed. So there's no one answer. Some people are very good at visualizing the future, but they're unwilling to zoom in the microscope on the present. And other people are very willing to look tactically at the present, but they're unwilling to commit to a certain path for the long term. And I think both of those people can be kind of helped and guided. I actually think, Vince, that everybody in the world has sort of a primal role that they kind of gravitate to. If you think of like an old time community, there's teachers, there's builders, there's policemen, whatever. There's these archetypal roles. I'm a shepherd. My job is to help guide people up the mountain that they choose and make sure that if they go off track, to try and help them back on the course. But ultimately, it has to be up to them to take the journey. They want to go up this mountain, and this is a mountain that they care deeply about. And so what I try to do, and I'm not always successful, is I try to, for those people who are willing to go out and find success, I try to make sure that they don't stumble and fall off a cliff.
Why aren't people willing to find success?
I think people are more drawn to comfort than they are to growth for the most case, I think.
I think you're right 100% there that we want to be comfortable because when we're not comfortable, we've got to look at life in a different way. And one of the things that I've seen in more before Imagine Miracles in my military career and my airline career, I've noticed that if I can stay comfortable, I can complain about not moving forward, but I know I'm safe in this comfort zone. How do people get out of that?
Well, and just to put a cap on that, I'll answer that, but just to put a cap on that, growth by definition requires the possibility of failure. Comfort does not. And so I think it's really the fear of failure. And I'll leave it at that. I could talk about limiting beliefs and fear of failure all day, but what was I'm sorry, re-ask the question. My apologies.
I'm just looking for your opinion on the comfort of staying the same is worth the pain to a lot of people. And I think, like you said, the fear of failure, I think the fear of success comes in there sometimes too for people as we're talking beliefs. But then also just taking responsibility for your life seems to create fear or create at least a static in people. And I was just wondering from your side of it, why do we do that? Why are we afraid to take responsibility? And then how do we start?
An object at rest tends to remain at rest unless an equal and opposite force acts against it, right? And so we're going to use our friend Newton as the basis for that answer. And I think what it really comes down to is when I'm at homeostasis, when I'm not changing, when I'm not growing, what I feel like is I'm safe. But the reality is, and there's a cliche for it, it's called grow or die, right? That's a cliche we've all heard. The reality is the moment that I stop raging against time and illness and death and my bank account and all of the other entropic things in our life, is the moment that I start to die in whatever way you want to take that, in whatever example. I think this is actually probably a universal truth, that if I'm not fighting against outside pressures, I'm actually acquiescing to them. And so I think for many people, some people use the term victim mentality. I don't typically use that term, but there is a moment where you become prey, where the jaguar has its jaws around your jugular and you just, for whatever reason, decide to stop fighting it. And I think that maybe I'm a little more sensitive to the jaguar's teeth than some, because I feel it. And when I feel it, I'm not going to swear, Vince, but I rage against that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So you come into a company, they're doing really well. The teams are doing well. The playbook is really strong, and you want to move them to the next step. You come in, you ask them questions. What's the results that you've seen with some of the companies you've worked with?
It's a great question. The truth is, and I've said this twice, winning is simple, period. So actually what I do is a lot less than what they've already been doing. Most of the people that I help are subject matter experts who have been knocking down brick walls to get from point 0 to point 1, maybe point 2. Maybe they've been able to stretch to point 2, right? And so these are people who've worn all the hats. They've been swinging sledgehammers and been solving problems on the fly. The biggest problem they have in their business is them, because they're swinging sledgehammers all day. And that's not the thing that's going to get them to the next level, that's going to find them greater success, that's going to allow them to scale the magic from between their ears into a scientific SOP to scale to a team and then impact the world. And so truthfully, the things that I've done most effectively with people is get them to put down the sledgehammer and maybe pick up a computer or pick up a book or whatever that might be, and help them to shift perspectives. It goes from me being, I need to remove pressure and noise from me, so I hire a couple of role players just so I can keep swinging the sledgehammer. It goes from that to me then, I need to actually promote my team. I actually need to make sure that I'm out of the way of my team, which means anything that's stuck in my head that they don't know is a liability, not an asset. And that's really difficult. I have friends who have 9-figure businesses who still struggle with that exact concept. And so to give you an idea of the success, I mean, it'll be one person, let's say, that owns a gym and they're coaching all the classes and they're the best in town. Maybe they're the best in the state. I don't know, maybe they're the best in the world, but 80 people get to find out about it because that's all they can handle, where they know everybody's name, they know their relationships. Maybe you get to 100, maybe if you're crazy good, you get to 150, but that's it. That's it. There's no book, there's no podcast, there's no scaling, there's no multiple locations until you stop thinking like a magician and you start acting like a scientist. Does that make sense, Vince?
Yes, it certainly does. It certainly does. And then, as you said, as an example of your life, you 10 times your business in just a very short amount of time. What or how do people prepare themselves to be willing to move from the sledgehammer to the computer?
I think it's by asking those questions. So you can pay me to do it, or you can do it yourself. You can just every time you take a big bite, break it down in constituent parts. I want to make $1 million next year. Okay. Well, what does that look like every quarter? Well, that looks like $83,000 a month. I have a little thing right in front of me that I always see. It's $83,000 a month. So what is that? $250,000 a quarter. And then 19,230 a week, 2,739 a day. All right, well, how much did I make yesterday? If the answer wasn't close to 2,739, then I need to adjust my parameters a little bit. And so it can be like that in everything. For instance, I can't possibly think about hiring anybody. I spend my whole week answering emails. My question might be, is there a way for us to codify and save the best emails you ever write for that particular setting? And maybe save those so you can cut down your time on doing that. And then once you get good at that, is it possible? Is it even conceivable that we could get somebody to understand which emails they should be using to respond to which questions? Okay, great. Well, now we've got that email problem solved. What's next? And so we can kind of go on down that path any number of ways you want, but ultimately it really comes down to the act of troubleshooting the business's questions that they ask of you.
So I'm going to ask one question that's kind of out of the flow for us here,
Sure.
because it's an Imagine Miracles type question. It's the Miracle You podcast type question. Do people find, or have you found in your experiences with some of these companies and corporations, small businesses even, have you found that people's talents and gifts aren't in alignment with moving to that place? And if they aren't, how do you help them?
It's a great question. I think there is a job for every tool. And I'll address one thing at the end of this, so don't let me forget. But there's a job for every tool, which means that if you're somebody who has a very big goal of impacting the world, and again, I'll use fitness because it's a really identifiable answer. You have a few ways you can do it. One, you can become a subject matter expert and work for a big chain of gyms and maybe influence them in that way. Two, you can start a small gym and eventually scale it and make it a little bigger. But let's say you're not predilected towards business systems or leadership or hiring people or making payroll on time. Well, you could start a fitness podcast, right? You can go the route of somebody who becomes an influencer in that way. And so technology has done a really good job of sort of being the invisible hand that puts you in the rooms you should be in. Now, the only reason that doesn't happen is really two, and this is kind of what I was mentioning earlier. One thing is you don't pay attention to your place in the world and actually objectively determine whether you're on the right path for you or not. That happens. Or two, and this is probably the one that I've struggled with from afar the most, and that is trying to help somebody who hates the thing they're great at. And this has come up, and it's actually I don't unfortunately have a good answer for that. I think probably that's one that only the person can solve, either breaking down whatever the barriers are for them or sidestepping it somehow to apply their stuff in other directions. So I'll give you an example. Like for me, podcasting is in my blood. I grew up listening to talk radio in the bus on the way to that school. Every single morning I was listening to political talk radio at 8 years old. And then it shifted to me sneaking a little radio in bed and listening to Loveline all night and Art Bell and things like that. And then when podcasting and audiobooks became pervasive, obviously it was a no-brainer. However, I could easily have seen, if that didn't present itself to me, I could have seen, public speaking. I could have foreseen, potentially having a radio show on terrestrial radio. There's all sorts of sort of different holes that this peg could potentially fit. But the key element there is seeking out your place in the universe where you fit. And again, that shows by definition a willingness to seek growth and be open to failure and pain.
To find your fire, to find the reason that you're here, because even the things that you might hate, when you find your reason and when you start living your reason, they start to find their way to the top and really empower you more than you would ever imagine they would. Believe it or not, Jason, we're getting close to our end of our time. Is there a parting piece of guidance that you could share?
I want to follow up on that actually, because the interesting thing I think a lot of times is people are unwilling. Maybe the thing that you hate is the thing at the beginning of that journey. You know, a lot of people say, I hate working out. Well, you hate not being able to work out and then trying to work out. But would you hate working out 6 years from now when you're super fit and everything works well and you've done this a lot? Probably not. Or maybe you hate construction work, but you're an unbelievable project manager or whatever. Would you hate the beginning of it, or would you hate owning a construction company that does amazing, beautiful work and impacts the world? And so I think a lot of times it's really our unwillingness to delay gratification, and to have the sight to pay attention to the horizon, not the curves in the road, that I think hinders us. And I think that probably qualifies as my last bit of advice.
Excellent. We get locked in the now sometimes, and we need to live in the now. I'm not saying we don't, but we get locked in the now and don't see where the now is leading us. I think you used it earlier. You know, some people even get into a victim mentality around that. Awesome. Well, thank you for that information. I know people want to learn more about you. They want to find out about the podcast. How can they find you?
I would love that. But first, Vince, I would hope that anybody still listening must really like your show. So make sure that if you haven't done it already, that you go and leave Vince a great review, subscribe it, and share it with one friend, because he is pouring his soul into this show and it shows. If you still have any energy left over, I would love for you to wander on over, find Spear and Clover podcast anywhere where podcasts are consumed, probably the app you're on right now. Also, would love to have you visit www.spearandclover.com, or you can find me on social media at Jason Skeesick or at Spear and Clover.
And as you all know, I'll make that information available on Jason's show page on themiracleu.com. Jason, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your heart and the difference that you're making in the world.
Thank you too, brother. I appreciate you helping me to do that.
On behalf of Mary, my wife and business partner, the entire team here at Imagine Miracles, we want to wish each and every one of you a miracle day.
You've completed this episode of The Miracle You, but we have plenty more to help you discover your own personal passion and purpose. Head over to themiracleu.com for free resources to assist you on your journey, as well as register for our free webinar, Discover Your Miracle Life, 3 mind-awakening steps toward your unique purpose, or apply for a one-on-one Your Life, Your Way breakthrough session and discover your next best step on your journey. All available exclusively on our website. That's themiracleu.com. We look forward to sharing more experiences of passion, purpose, and life by design next time, right here on The Miracle You.